One of the hardest challenges you can ever do in TFT is climb to 2000 LP. This is because as you get to a certain point around 14 to 1500, your LP gains slow dramatically. Third places are basically the same as fourths, and if you get a second, you're sometimes getting something like 15 to 16 LP. So on average, you have to go like top 2, top 3 around 3 to 4 times more often than you go 5th or 6th. And God forbid you ever go 8th, because if so, that's an end stream angle. In today's episode of In Too Deep, we dive into the very first global 2000 LP player from China, A Hao. A Hao is the first ever China Regionals winner and has made it to Worlds multiple times. Not to mention he's also performed well in ladder-based competitions like Super Server. Let's see if A Hao knows something that we don't. So A Hao has been on a tear. He's the first player to climb the 2000 LP, and he's doing it through the most consistent method, which is non-stop top fours. Just looking at his scores, he got it first, but it's, a lot of thirds, 3, 6, 2, 5, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 3, 4. And that's how you climb in TFT for the most part. It's really not necessarily just about going like top 2, getting those big fast 9 first all the time. It's really about getting those top fours and avoiding, fifths and below. So the key to climbing to really high LP in general is always minimizing your mistakes and trying your best to avoid bot 4. So that often means you're going to be taking fewer risks. Instead, you're going to be trying to play more consistent, higher tempo, win streak stage 2 and 3, play for more HP preservation, and less like open forward into like trying to stabilize, because that's a higher chance that you miss and then you lose and go 8th. We passed this Evelyn headliner, which I think with Crowd Diver Evelyn, it's a little bit less consistent when you don't have KD to start. Plus, he doesn't really have items for her. Also, I believe he actually got some really important information. He just got 2 orbs. He got a Gnar orb and he got the Jax orb that they sold, and he has 3 items. So he knows that there's going to be 5 item opener. And so that brings us to a really important thing to keep in mind. When you have a 5 item or high item opener in a game, tempo is going to be much higher than normal. And what that means is you can't really settle for middling headliners. Now the question is, why is something like that Evelyn headliner, and I actually think this Lily is kind of mid-level headliner as well, is that it doesn't really do anything to make him feel strong for stage 2. The previous one that we looked at was Evelyn doesn't have a KDA, so she can't really unlock anything really powerful, and we don't really have a setup for her. In this case, if we pick up a headliner of her Lilia, it doesn't really feel very strong because we don't have damage. If you put Lilia 2 and then you have Kennen and Cassante and maybe a Gnar, it's like, how do you actually kill units? You rely on Lilia to deal all the damage, and she's not really that good in able to deal damage. She's actually a healer. That's like her role. And not to mention that with these 5 items, people are going to be much stronger than usual. So I actually think a pass here makes a lot of sense. He actually does something really interesting as well. If you notice, he actually pre-levels. He takes this 4 gold, invests into leveling beforehand, so that he can get an option for potentially spiking a 2-cost headliner. It's more likely that you get a 1-cost and a 2-cost at level 4, but at least now it's on the table, which can help give him some direction. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this early augments here. First augment is Twin Terror, which is an augment that I know not many people like to play around. I think Twin Terror is something that feels restrictive more than open-ended. If you look at Double Trouble, the stats that you used to get were a lot better for offensive stuff, and you got like things like armor and magic resistance, and you got a lot of extra damage stuff. So in the past, Double Trouble just felt more versatile. Twin Terror is kind of unusual. It gives you some HP. It gives you like crit chance, and it's just a little bit unusual in terms of the stats. So you have to like kind of play around it very particularly. And the only times you ever really think about Twin Terror is when you can utilize things like crit immediately, so you can capitalize off that crit chance. The attack speed is nice though on Twin Terror, and I think that's generic. So in some ways you can play it open-ended, but I think that it's very hard to, so I would recommend against it. Fully adapted is something that you want to compound onto your headliner. We talked about this in a previous video, how to make the best of your headliner, which is items multiplying with your augments on top of your headliner. In this case, he doesn't have a headliner, nothing to really play around early. If he had like a really strong defensive unit, maybe play around like an early 2-star 1-cost headliner tank, you could probably put fully adapted on the front line. And then another thing is you want to have a second item to slam with that. So you take like fully adapted, make another adaptive helm, but we have rod vest, belt, bow, and glove. So that doesn't really give us the ability to capitalize on fully adapted. Same thing with Crown Guard and Titan's Resolve as well. You want to make sure if you get those item-based augments, you want to get double of them as fast as you can so you can get more value. And then healing orbs is okay. I mean, it's generic tempo. It's much better early than it is late, because late game you get percentage healing, which is much more powerful. Let's just take like Martyr for example. Martyr is percentage based healing, so that scales with the more HP that you're able to get in the late game, versus healing orbs is always going to be 450 health. So it's better when you have like 1,000 HP units as opposed to 3 to 4,000 HP units in the late game. So I'm actually okay with rerolling like all of these. If he wants to hold on to one, he could just take it for safety. He gets offered Vampirism, which is generically very good. Vampirism is actually one of the strongest combat augments because it's really solid amount of stats for your whole team. It's kind of like tons of stats, but instead of gaining like, a little bit of armor and MR and everything like that, you're getting HP and Omnivamp, which is surprisingly good when it scales later in the game. So Vampirism is pretty solid in general. That's something I would lean to taking. It's almost never bad to take it either early game if you don't have a strong board, because then you can scale into it. Idealism is our other choice here, and we do have another glove, so you could theoretically lean into it. Plus, Idealism is really strong in the meta because there's a lot of viable 4-cost carries right now that can utilize it that are melee. So you can put like Hand of Justice on Akali or Zed or Viego, and you can put on really strong legendaries like Kiana and Kayn. There's a lot of different uses of Idealism right now. I mean, who doesn't really like bonus damage in general? It's a very good stat. So I actually lean towards probably Vampirism, but I think Idealism is also reasonable. But he's not rolling Twin Terror, which is really interesting. Oh my gosh. And he gets a Country Tom Kench with a Amumu and a Vex. Now, I personally believe Amumu Vex is actually really good with Twin Terror, but he's too poor. And it looks like he wants to slam like Last Whisper. Okay. And then is it Sunfire or is it Crown Guard? I think I lean more towards Crown Guard because I think Sunfire is good early, but drops off late significantly because you'd rather have stronger anti-heal options that can do AoE like Morello and Red Buff. And then Sunfire late game only applies anti-heal very slowly. And then at the same time, you also want a better defensive item than Sunfire Cape because it doesn't give you a lot of tank stats. Also, you saw him like clicking things like a Mumu and Vex. Like he wishes he can hold on to them because it's really good. But the reality is we also slammed a Last Whisper. So now we're committed to, well, I think we're committed to Samira. And maybe the fact that we have Country, we just reroll a Country Samira from this point. That'd be kind of interesting. And it looks like he agrees with the idea of Crown Guard Slam over a Sunfire Cape. This is actually pretty close because Sunfire, we talked about how you want to preserve a lot of HP. And even though he's trying to reroll, he already committed to leveling, so he has to kind of try to win at least a couple of these fights and keep his HP high. Not to mention that Country and Samira is a higher tempo reroll comp, and that's an important thing to understand. I think a lot of players who are really trying to first learn like reroll or trying to like get better at it tend to just bucket reroll as just like one generic thing where like, okay, maybe you like econ early by loose streaking and then you roll at stage 3, you hit your 3-star spike, and then you try to like, get really strong. But assuming TFT is a well-balanced and good game, there's all kinds of reroll compositions, just like there's all kinds of standard tempo compositions and so on and so forth. So in this case, Country Samira reroll tends to lean towards being higher tempo. You actually try to play for HP preservation, and then once you start hitting your 3-stars, you spike a lot earlier than everybody else, and then you bleed to like a 2nd or 3rd place very consistently. And that's a big contrast to, say, playing like a 1-cost anti reroll where you want to lose streak the entirety of your early game so you have a bunch of economy, roll a ton at 3-1 so you can hit anti 3, and then win streak stage 3. So in this spot, he actually does want to commit to that win, and the fact that he could get away with slamming a Crown Guard instead of a Sunfire Cape is really, really good. And now this is Samira with the vest, so he actually has one of those 2 valuable Samiras. Not to mention, he can go back to what he was doing before, which is play for tempo. He can play for Crown Guard and Sunfire now and get that Samira. So I really like this choice, and I like his approach right now in general. The other element of 3-cost reroll is that you are trying to get to level 7 without rolling a single time. And in the ideal scenario, you do want to actually try to win streak. Realistically, a lot of times you're not gonna be able to do that, but in this spot with Twin Terror, it all kind of makes sense. He has a really good Last Whisper holder in the Jinxes, and he was fortunate enough to hit Jinx 2 plus that actual copy of Jinx. Now he has Pumpkin with this Country. Very nice and clever use of Twin Terror only on 1 unit. I think a lot of people feel like with Twin Terror or Double Trouble in the past, you try to get as much value as you possibly can, but in reality, it's only going to be benefiting a unit like Jinx pretty significantly. And if we could find another Tom Kench, maybe get a little bit of HP, but crit chance and attack speed, that's not really important stats on units like Tom Kench. So instead, we can focus on getting a powerful synergies like Country and that Pumpkin. Another question that people might ask is it ever worth using things like this extra 1 gold reroll on Punk in these kinds of situations? Like, hey, why don't you just roll? Your Punk is stronger, and then you can sell your Katarina for 20 if you miss. But what if he actually does hit? That's actually the big question. If he actually does hit with this Punk reroll, then he actually has to buy it, and then he's not making 20. So it's actually a trap to roll in the spot because I think a lot of people would say, oh, oh man, I can't really like pass this extra Samira in the shop or whatever else I want to hold. I have to lock it. It's like, if you're going to lock it, then why'd you roll in the first place? You might as well have just naturally rolled it next. This is a nice heads up play. And also, not to mention, doesn't need to roll to get stronger because he just lost. And so not like a super high roll stage 2. It's okay. You know, 3 loss, 2 wins. It's fine. But now we have a clear path on how we want to get to Country Samira. It's funny that he actually brings us a team planner because I think the path is pretty clear. It's interesting that he's including Katarina in the mix here. I guess maybe he just wants to pick up every country he possibly can. Okay, wow, nice. A Samira off of Orb. And I mean, that's a little bit of a high roll. So you're able to get some Twin Terror value and a Vex. We have the Executioner. Although we were able to play Twitch, and I was going to say exactly this. I think Twitch actually might be stronger, even though Vex longer term is what we play for, because we have that Punk. So again, capitalizing onto this. And going back to what we were saying before, yes, you could just play a second Twitch for that Twin Terror value, but it's not that valuable in this spot because, again, you don't really have items onto this Twitch. And while he does benefit from the attack speed and the crit, your frontline would just be a Tahm Kench 2 and nothing else. So this brings a little bit more balance to his composition, which is good. The highlight is now he has a good level 6. He can just level the 6 and play the second Twitch 1, and he did get stronger and he gets Twin Terror value. So that could be his next unit. Going against a strong level 6 board, it looks like we're just going on a 3 loss, and our board is not that good. So, you know, we did get some unfortunate things, but like, okay, like a double Twitch shop and a Samira orb, but we're still losing a lot of HP and it's a little bit dicey. All right, so now we have Overwhelming Force, one of the best prismatics in the game right now, Cybernetic Bulk, giving 555 HP, and Determined Investors. Determined Investor is probably the least likely option here. I think that we have too many frontline items already. We have a Crown Guard, a Sunfire, and a Vest, and if we take this, and let's say we get 2 more defensive items, where does this Diamond Hands go, and like, where do we fit those defensive items more? I don't really like it at all. Cybernetic Bulk is probably generically the best. I do wonder about Overwhelming Force, though, because we have a Last Whisper, and the second best item that you often go for on Samira alongside Last Whisper is Infinity Edge. And so if you're able to get that and you get that extra sword to potentially itemize a second Samira, I can actually see this being a really good option in this spot. The data on Overwhelming Force is worse versus Cybernetic Bulk. Actually, if you look, Cybernetic Bulk is generically like, you know, 2/10 higher, which is pretty significant of a jump. I think a lot of people would auto pick Cybernetic Bulk, but in this spot, actually, the more I think about it, I think I really like Overwhelming Force because it just makes that Samira much more healthy. Ooh, Prismatic Ticket. Lucky Gloves. Wow, actually, these are all like tempting options because you could justify Prismatic Ticket so that you can hit much more often since you're trying to reroll a certain composition. And then you could also justify Lucky Gloves because you're playing the Executioners, but I think we already have our items. Like we said, I think this is almost too good to pass up. So hopefully this helps illuminate, showing you don't just auto pick the best augments based on the data, even though it's really good. Try to think about, does this augment help in my specific position? I think the biggest factor of what Overwhelming Force has convinced me over Cybernetic Bulk is we didn't have to roll that much. He did end up leveling and rolling just a little bit, a stabilizing around a Poppy plus Twitch 2. But the fact that he got that 3 AM Samira immediately is really nice because now it's like, well, if you hit a Samira 2, it almost feels like you want to roll more for another copy of Samira, which actually even goes back to the question, should he have even rolled that much? But I think with holding a couple pairs, you can go for it. I see. So now he's going for a Punk roll every single round and see if he can pick up some of those really important units. Like he did, for example, pick up this extra Twitch. Now he has the Twin Terror Twitch. Does he actually want the Bruise and the Mosher? I might like this more than the second Twitch because, again, this Twitch is just a synergy bot. And while we could put items on him, in fact, you can actually put a sword onto this Twitch. I don't mind because I think he's only temporary. I really like the way that he's utilizing Punk the mid game. Compare this to the way he played Punk in stage 2. In stage 2, Punk was only there to help provide cheap stats with a little bit of AD and a little bit of HP in frontline. Now he's using Punk for mid game rerolls now that the game has been set into motion. So basically he can start getting like the rerolls in with the Punk to try to see if he can hit more Samiras. Now he's picking up some really valuable pieces like at early sets. If he wants, he can go for a Twin Terror on the Tahm Kench if he finds a better unit. So this is actually really clever use of Punk in the mid game, and it's those micro optimizations that keeping him consistently strong and fighting back for HP. If you notice earlier in the game, he was like 7th at one point with 80 HP in stage 2 because he was taking some bad losses. And now for the most part, he's pretty stable. We got an Urgot with a glove off the carousel, which is fantastic. So now can we actually go for 5 country? I believe we can. 5 country is really good. It is a important breakpoint to get because you get your team-wide Omnivamp. And while Executioner is nice, we have the Infinity Edge, so it's not that important. Oh my, an IE Slam on the Urgot as well. Okay, so this means that we're going to go for double Samira and double Urgot. Okay, that makes a lot of sense because you're rerolling the same tiers, and usually you want to play Samira Urgot, and that means at level 7 we can just go Samira, Urgot with 2 more country, ideally Thresh +1, and then we get a country headliner, and that gives us flexibility to keep that set in so we can get some really important synergies like the Bruiser and the Mosher. I didn't really think about Infinity Edge on Urgot, largely because he cares more about Bruiser items, but he's trying to capitalize off of the crit strike chance that he gets off of Twin Terror. So this is a specific itemization for the Twin Terror, which is when you have Twin Terror and it gives you crit strike chance, that chance is a little bit wasted if you're not getting the ability to crit in the first place. So this is not necessarily the itemization you want to go traditionally for Urgot, which I really like. It's situational awareness in TFT like that. That's really exciting to watch. 60 seconds going for true damage emblem, which is pretty scary. That means some people are getting really powerful in this lobby. True damage is considered to be the strongest right now in the metagame. Let's see if he's able to 4 streak here. If he's able to get this 4 win, that is massive. And look, that he's doing it all with 1 cost units as well. Very efficient. And I think it goes back to a lot of the augment choice, right? I think that overwhelming force is really good in this spot. And because he's capitalizing with the punk reroll, he's got to level 7 very cleanly. And now he sells and opens his headliner so we can hit the Samira. Ideally at Samira, I don't know if you'd pass an Urgot because it would be a significant spike as well. And you are itemizing. Oh, interesting. We're going for set itemization as well. I mean, I guess that makes sense. We just sold Tahm Kench 2 and set 1 is better than Tahm Kench 1. If you hit set 2, that's way better than Tahm Kench 2. Gets a golden orb. Gets 9 gold, which is okay. I mean, honestly, the fact that he got another set pair is pretty nice. So orbs have been good to him so far. Samira 2. Oh, a country Urgot. So does he actually buy this or does he pass this? I like the buy because it immediately is a huge spike and he doesn't have the Samira. If he passed this Urgot headliner, he could be rolling for a really long time before he finds another Samira. And while you are re-rolling, it is important that you try to still keep a good amount of economy so that you don't have to be poor for the rest of the game. I see a lot of players in this case like tunnel only on Samira headliner and they roll, and let's say they find Samira with like 15 gold left, they buy and like, okay, great, I have Samira, but then they're not making interest gold, and then all of a sudden they're kind of stuck in a spot where they can't really rack up enough gold to make a significant roll down later on the spike. So really good choice there to actually end up going for it. All right, we got Talent Search, Infernal Contract, and Hedge Fund. 2 of these end up being a lot of gold, but Infernal Contract gives you 90 gold in particular. This is a recent buff, and this is the exact kind of spot that you want to pick Infernal Contract because you want to reroll for everything 3 cost. So that everything catches my eye. Talent Search is better when you scale more of your board. If you're going for a fast 9 and 2-star legendaries, I think that's where Talent Search can be pretty good because that way you can get Headliner, Kiana, plus like the headliner stuff on like Sona and Yorick, so on and so forth. That's where Talent Search can be pretty phenomenal, where all your units are all-stars, so you don't have to necessarily worry about which headliner effect you get. And Hedge Fund is, I think, just weaker than Infernal Contract. Like, why take 40 gold when you can take 90 and you're trying to stay on 7 for the majority of the game anyways? So I think I'm leaning towards Infernal Contract, and I think he pretty much agrees. If you're general going for a 3-cost roll down, you really want Infernal Contract, and now he has the excuse of sending it and spiking it and trying to go for that ultimate Twin Terror board. It is picking up everything along the way as well. Sometimes people are saying, okay, I'm going to roll only for my carries, but in this case, you're not going to go to 8 anyways, so just roll for everything. Like, pick up things like that Tahm Kench copies. He's selling the Katarinas because the moment he finds the Thresh, he's going to replace Katarina with Thresh since that's the 5th country, and you just limit it on slots on the board. Oh, did he get it off in time? He did not, and he also missed a gold on his board, so he's stuck at 19. Didn't find a set 3, but my gosh, this board is looking really strong now. And so I think this is a game where people are like, wow, okay, you hit Samira 3 super early, you hit Infernal Contract, great, I can do that. But look at the path that he put himself onto. I think a lot of people, when they look at things like Twin Terror, they see things like Overwhelming Force, they're looking past it. And these are different ways that you can approach reroll and make it a lot more than just what people accuse of, which is brain dead, pressing D over and over like your monkey. I think there's a lot more thought being put into a game like this than the average reroll game. Okay, the only thing I'm not sure about is he's rolling to 0 like really hard to hit Urgot 3. Okay, so he did hit Urgot 3. This is really, really aggressive. He is on a win streak, and again, he can't go to 8, so like building up gold is for only one thing, which is to roll more, because you can't push to level 8. So in his mind, he's saying, okay, I'm so close to Urgot 3. I was about to hit set 3. At this point, I'm just going to push and try to leverage my advantage. And this is actually a really important note of what he did actually in this spot. He's pressuring people who are trying to go to level 9. Like, he just killed a level 9 player, right? And so he's trying to push his tempo because he knows gold, prismatic, that tempo in the lobby is going to be really high. When you have multiple prismatic augments in the game, people are going to have a much stronger boards than usual because they have like all this crazy power. And he only has a window where it's going to be a strong composition because because if people get their level 9 2-star legendary boards on, then he's going to fall off in power. So he has to really push the tempo at this point and punish people who are trying to greed in stage 4 or who are missing on their roll down. He's trying to be aggressive. A lot of times people are saying, how can I stop fast 9, right? In my previous video, people are like, well, if they get to 9, they have this decon stuff. Like, what can I really do? If you're playing something like this, push the tempo, try to roll and get your board as strong as possible within your confines, right? Like if you pick hedge fund, probably more questionable to send to 0 every single turn, but in this case for Infernal Contract, it makes a lot of sense. And so this is the way he's punishing people who are like, honestly, like just being a little bit too greedy or just not having strong enough boards, right? He has 15 HP, 39, and this is a way that he's racking up the LP to climb to 2K. Okay, I'm done nerding about his macro in terms of like all the major decision points that he's made. Macro is defined often by the game plan and general strategy you're setting, and micro is often like how you're positioning or maybe like their individual roll down or, you know, different smaller things like that. Now he's streaking. His positioning is a little bit interesting in the sense that he wants the units to crowd around this right side angle here because Urgot is actually a cone champion. He wants to attack a lot of people that are clumped around certain units. So he's actually trying to invite people to crowd around Set. In fact, Set's also a cone AoE champion as well. When he punches, does this one punch man thing, he actually does like a little cone. So it all kind of works really nice as a little funnel. And he doesn't want it to be like a giant wide angle. So he has this Tom Kench kind of playing interference there on the top left. So it's this little clever positioning as well, which I really like. He also puts his Samira in the back because he's trying to focus fire. He wants his Urgot and his Samira to be attacking the same thing because Samira has the Last Whisper. If he spread out and say, you know, had Samiras in the corners instead, then the Samira could potentially be attacking a different unit. You want to burst through as fast as can and try to ambush. So a lot of these small little things are what the positioning I like for A Hao, and I'm pretty sure he's booked his ticket to top 4. So the question is, can he find a way to min-max? Here's a really interesting part about Infernal Contract is, okay, we now know that we hit max cap, right? We hit our 5 country. He even sold his extra set too because he knows he's not going to get to the late. So from here, how do we do better than just like a 3rd or a 4th, right? Like, is he able to maximize his placements any other way? Let's keep watching and see. So in this case, he's thinking about items for Urgot. He needs to get 3 items ASAP. I think Giant Slayer is probably the best pickup here, but he ends up going for a Deathblade. That's really, really interesting. There's no inherent synergy with Deathblade off the top of my head, and I think that partially what I like about Giant Slayer is to get past these really tanky frontliners. But Deathblade is generically like one of the best AD items in general on any AD champion because it just scales everything. Deathblade scales the flat auto attack. It also scales the damage of your abilities. So you kind of like double dip there. And so Deathblade's like never really bad on an AD champion, except for champions that are able to obtain AD. So if you're playing like 8-bit, for example, that gives you a lot of AD, you generally don't want Deathblade. So it's fine there. I think it's kind of like he probably is scouting and keeping tabs on the lobby. I'm a little bit more focused on his positioning than necessarily like the composition of his opponent's lobbies. And just looking at it for the most part, like there are some, oh wow, there's a Riven 3. There are some 3-cost units, but if you're anticipating like Giant Slayer to not be that impactful, which it's okay right now, and Deathblade just could be a lot stronger in terms of amplifying off that crit, I could totally see it making sense here. We're going up against Disco here, and right now we are just having an unkillable front line. He does have a remover, and long term, like long term, I think we do want to have a 3rd real defensive item on Set. Wait a second. The guy that I just played, the Disco player, is going for Blitzcrank 3, and he has 7 blitzes. He's got 1 here that's headlinered. He has a double. Oh my god. He has Blitzcrank 3. Well, this is gonna be hard to deal with. It's only a 2-item Blitzcrank 3. Oh my god, the biggest of robots. Oh my god, that is a thick Blitzcrank. Sheesh. This dude just FFs. I think people are starting to recognize that they're probably not gonna have a chance. This is also another reason why preserving HP is really important, because let's say you play Loose Streak into this. If people are playing double prismatic lobbies and hitting things like 3-star 4 costs and all those legendary boards, where you are in your HP is almost like the pecking order of likely where you finish -1. So this Blitzcrank 3, let's just say this Blitzcrank thing wins the lobby. So because we're A Hao's in first, now likely to get second, and even better for him, all these players at 22, 19, 15, 15 are just going to take punishment from that Blitzcrank. And that is why preserving HP can be so valuable when you're playing these 3-cost tempo rerolls in particular. Picked up a 3rd Crown Guard, which is, I think, our only defensive item. I think I saw Shiv and whatnot, nothing particular particularly really strong there. So I'm okay with this. You can also place it on a Thresh if you don't want to remove that Sunfire Cape, because in reality, you want to put Sunfire Cape on whoever can live the longest, which is usually a frontliner. The only caveat is sometimes you want a better defensive item than Sunfire Cape, because, you know, Bramble and Dragon's Claw and Redemption are just like way more efficient of a defensive item for him. Going against Gargantuan Resolve, Radiant Titans on a Jewel Lotus 3 Viego, but just look how fast he gets melted, right? This is all because of like the fact that everyone who's trying to play these melee carries are just running into Urgot. Urgot countering these melee carries very hard, and you also have the Samira layering on top of it. And actually, just thinking about it, he actually high rolled by playing that Blitzcrank player right before he hit Blitzcrank 3, so all that timing ends up lining up very, very nicely for him. Ari Sniper's Focus, true damage with what the Forge Akali? What the heck is this board? There's some woke plays happening in China, that's for sure. There's a lot of the stuff you definitely wouldn't see in NA Challenger. People just generally don't take these augments. Oh man, China's so interesting with the way they like approach some of their augment choices compared to NA. All right, we're going up against the Blitzcrank 3, and we did move over this Urgot 1 slightly over so we can try to focus down this Blitzcrank 3. And this Blitzcrank is just tanking so much, and we're taking so much passive damage. We have no shot. We have no shot. And the problem is that they can continue to get stronger. They're level 8, and they can continue to like, you know, get to level 9, and we're just stuck here on 7 rolling. We're probably just going to collect our second and get out here. But overall, I think this is fantastic macro play from A Hao with some minor things that I think along the way, like I think every 2-3 rounds, I think he was doing something a little bit different and pretty unique that I think a lot of other players would not be doing. Fast forwarding, nothing crazy came out of the drop from 5-7. We're going to roll, see if we can hit Tom Catch 3. Maybe that's cool. Get a little Toad 3. I guess technically one misplay that he could have been doing was he could have been keeping tabs onto that Blitzcrank and rolled to hit one of those blitzes to stop him. But it's a little bit hard and unreasonable to ask him to do that because level 7, you only have 10% odds. So now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, yeah, could you actually have done something to deny that Blitzcrank? Maybe like roll to 0, but it's a really unlikely thing to happen in the first place, either for the person to hit 3-star Blitzcrank or even to hit deny him. And that person also had a duplicator, so it was going to be tough to stop in the first place. Oh man, Huamei's actually really strong as well with his Ari with double Sniper's Focus true damage. This would be kind of tragic if it was a third, but I think Huamei just has too little HP unless he magically beats the Blitzcrank player one time or barely survives and we take bad losses. Man, I'm a little bit sad that we don't have the Sunfire Cape onto the Tomcats 3 because we don't have Barbecue Toad online. I feel like that's a nice throwback build from set 4. I think this is actually a good example of a matchup that Samir can struggle with. This Eternal Winter and this high HP count is like stunning Samir repeatedly, so she's not really capitalizing on her style and flair. So this is actually very hard for her. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to wonder if we're not gonna get second this game because we're due after the Blitzcrank player. I mean, maybe the Blitzcrank player just like beats both players here and ends up getting a second. Oh man, this is actually really strong. They're getting to 9 and now they have Sona 2. Yeah, it's GG for sure. He's gonna try to do some repositioning. Oh, draw everything to the left side and focus fire on the left. I can see that because he's trying to work his way around Blitzcrank. He's saying, okay, instead of focus firing Blitzcrank, I'm never gonna kill him. I'll kill more units if I move to the side and hope that some units fall into Blitzcrank. And he does clean up like 1 or 2 extra units because of that instead of focusing firing the Blitzcrank and not killing him. And didn't end up mattering, but that's like something that could matter. And he already knows that he's lost his game, so he's gonna go ahead and forfeit. And that's the end of the game. I just realized 4th place got Caitlyn 3. What? I guess I didn't really notice that on the panel because I was too busy analyzing him, but this is an insane lobby. So in some ways, yeah, like, you know, he's high rolling by, you know, hitting the Samir 3 and whatnot, but like if he didn't push the tempo nearly as much as he did, this Caitlyn 3 should have probably been like top 2, top 3 at least. This feels so bad for this player, and it's largely because they just ran out of HP and probably because they lost one of the matches to the Blitzcrank 3 player and then they just died. I'd be so mad if I was a Caitlyn player. A really good demonstration of the consistency of A Hao, who is a top CN player, a regionals winner, and also showing you like how he's consistent enough to climb to 2K LP and being the first person to do it. Small adaptations and optimizations across the board and doing things like, you know, taking in that mid-game punk rerolls or finding ways to get optimal augment value even though it's not as good in the data, and recognizing lobby tempo because the way everything was escalating from people rolling for 3-star 4 cost and getting the double prismatic. Excellently done and congratulations. That's it for this episode of In Too Deep. I'm Frodan. I'll see you guys next time.